Good evening, my friends. This is the Grimflayer. Hope you're all doing very well tonight. Playing some more Golgari for you, and yeah, if you're enjoying this content, if you're enjoying the Golgari gameplay, please feel free to like, share, subscribe, and visit the link below, which will take you to my Patreon page. If you would like to support this content, to support some regular Golgari gameplay that is really thorough, and I dare say not the lowest quality gameplay you'll ever see, then yeah, those are the ways to do it. So for all of you who are already supporting any way you can, I truly appreciate it. You are the best, and I thank you. So let's play some Golgari. We have won the die roll, so we're really good at rolling automated digital dice, but we're really bad at drawing sevens that are functional. This hand is not a keep. We don't keep one-landers game one land sevens, that is. We might keep a one land six, or certainly a one land five is sometimes the best you can do. But when we draw a 7-card hand with only one land, we can basically always do better. At least have a good chance to do better with 6. And that's kind of a hard and fast rule, and on top of that hard and fast rule, we just have a lot of the top end in hand anyway. This hand is definitely not keepable. So let's throw it back. Alright, we have mulliganed to a more functional 6. It's actually much more functional. We've got 2 pieces of discard, a piece of interaction with the board, and a threat. Not much to complain about with this hand. Our opponent will also mulligan. We're going to keep. They will keep 6 as well. And we have another Tasigur on top, so note that our hand has a fetch land and a creature land. So if we had seen something really nice on top, we would have left it there and been able to just lead on the Hissing Quagmire. As it is, it doesn't really matter what we do with this Tasigur because we don't want it. And, you know, obviously, having a redundant Tasigur in hand, we don't want the other one. Therefore, we're going to lead on a discard spell and shuffle away our Scry anyway. Inquisition of Kozilek, target the opponent, and it's showing us what looks like Grixis control. I played against this on a video just a few videos ago, you know, maybe a few days ago at this point. I don't know about you guys, but I had not seen a Grixis control deck in a long time, and now I'm seeing them a lot. I've probably seen it 4 times in the last week. Maybe that's just me, but anyway, I don't think it's necessarily making a resurgence in the meta or something, but I don't know. I'm seeing it everywhere. Who knows? But anyway, our opponent has a really low curve 6. It's got the kind of the core 1-drop of each of its 3 colors. Now, which one do we care about the most? We see that they have 3 lands but no black mana. So for that reason, we want to consider just leaving the Thoughtseize, but that's kind of its own consideration, and let's consider the spells independently of whether they have black mana or not. Because, of course, they're a control deck. They make a lot of land drops. Most of the land drops they'll make will be able to produce or fetch black, right? So we don't want to leave the Thoughtseize in hand if it's actually their best card, because they could just top deck an answer or a way to cast it. So they have Lightning Bolt. In general, we don't care that much about Lightning Bolt. Especially if we know they have a Lightning Bolt, we play a Planeswalker, we're going to tick it up. Lightning Bolt doesn't cleanly answer it. Lightning Bolt also does not cleanly answer most of our creatures. Especially, again, once we know about it, we can sequence accordingly with creatures that it does answer, like Scavenging Ooze. It's harder to sequence around Lightning Bolt with Tracker in terms of allowing it to live, but of course, we don't even mind them trading their card for our card because we get a clue off of it if we play the Tracker on turn 4. So Lightning Bolt in general is not a card we care that much about. Serum Visions it's kind of whatever. Obviously, it's a good cantrip. We wouldn't feel necessarily bad taking that here. especially because they can't cast the Thoughtseize. So I think it's either Serum or Thoughtseize. Here's the problem with leaving Thoughtseize. We're not going to cast our Tasigur next turn. We're going to cast it turn 3 at the earliest. And that gives them at least 2 draw steps to hit a black source, and then they're going to cast the Thoughtseize. Then we lose our only threat. Tasigur is very, very good in this matchup. They're going to struggle to answer him. They play bolts, fatal pushes, cards like that. And, of course, it's a big threat. It's hard to remove, and it is a card advantage engine. So for that reason, I took the only uncastable spell in their hand. Seems a little bit counterintuitive, but I think if we're looking kind of down the tunnel of time a few turns ahead, that is the correct play. Our opponent's going to shock in that Steam Vents and play their Serum Visions. You got it, my friend. You got it. We'll draw a Hissing Quagmire. Alright. Making more land drops is what we need, and I guess we don't have anything better to do necessarily with our mana, so we don't mind the fact that it is another ETB tapped creature land, and we will Thoughtseize our opponent. Client is a little sluggish this evening, but there we go. Okay, so we see that they picked up a Jace Vryn's Prodigy and a Polluted Delta. Once more, we don't really care about that Lightning Bolt, so we'll go ahead and take away JVP, and we will pass the turn. Polluted Delta and pass. Alright, we draw a Field of Ruin. That's a pretty good draw here because it actually lets us just tap out for a Tasigur. And unless they drew a Logic Knot or something similar here, which they did not, we've got the turn 3 Tasigur. That is quite nice. Quite nice in this matchup. Field of Ruin itself is no slouch as well as far as a piece of utility goes out of the land base. Alright, we draw a Thoughtseize. Interesting draw. So, we're at the stage where we have cleaned them out of enough resources where it is realistic for us to start attacking with Hissing Quagmires. Now, they do have a Field of Ruin, so of course they can answer one of them, but we have another one in hand. Lightning Bolt is not a card that we care too much about. If we trade a land for a spell, that's kind of fine with us, but still, it's we're now at a stage where their ability to bolt our Quagmire is a consideration. So we know they have at least one spell in hand. We're going to Thoughtseize them. We think they have more, and indeed they do. So they don't do anything in response here because, Snap in response doesn't feel great. It can't cast anything in the graveyard with Flashback, and just throwing it down as a 2-1, it's not like we have a Planeswalker to pressure. It's not like our board is empty. So that doesn't do much. So they're just going to say, sure, take whatever you want. And it will be the Snapcaster Mage. The Fatal Push is a better card against us than the Lightning Bolt, but for now, we just don't care about it. So I am very happy that we Thoughtseize there, even though it means we can't really do anything else with our turn. No Field of Ruin activation, no Hissing Quagmire activation, no ability to hold up Assassin's Trophy. All this is totally fine. Now, this is interesting. Our opponent is going to go ahead and field our own field. So, that's fair enough if they want to just use that while they have the free mana. I understand that. But they don't seem too concerned about the Hissing Quagmires. Now, they have answers in hand, but if they just bolt and push our Quagmires, they still got to do something about this Tasigur. And, of course, now we get to hold up Assassin's Trophy too, which might not be the worst thing in the world. But it looks like they're just... Okay, Lightning Bolt. I can only imagine another one is here to follow, or another damage spell of some kind. And sure enough, they 2-for-1 themselves to take care of our Tasigur. That is totally fine with me. Okay, Blooming Marsh, not the best draw in the world. We are going to fire up the Hissing Quagmire, though. That's all we can do this turn. If they want to spend that Fatal Push here, that is pretty much fine with me. Sure. Good enough. We've got another one where that came from, and we've got a land to replace it as far as our mana production goes, so that is just fine. They are in top deck mode. What did they find? They found a Fulminator Mage. Okay, well, main deck Fulminator is very interesting. That's actually... I can see a world in which that's very, very good. They can buy it back with Kolagin's Command. Maybe they play Liliana the Last Hope. You know, these Grixis decks, they play a lot of really grindy stuff, and this certainly fits the bill. The fact that its main deck is a little scary, it makes me feel they've built around it, at least to some degree. Like I said, it does have some natural synergies, but that's a pretty bold choice. I like it. I like it. So we're going to go ahead and fire up the Quagmire again. If our opponent chooses to trade here or to Stone Rain this, sure, that's fine with me. And if they chose to take it, it was fine with me too, because I think we're more likely to draw a clock than they are. They find a Creeping Tar Pit. This is a really powerful manland. If you had a chance to check out Reed Duke's Sultai videos, I think he has two from before he took a dip into Golgari. He was playing a little bit Sultai. This is before his Golgari video, but after Assassin's Trophy came out. And it seems like one of the reasons he was into Sultai is for this land. It was the manland that he, I believe, ran 3 or 4 of it, at least in one of the videos I saw. I mean, just the fact that it's unblockable, it's so good at pressuring Planeswalkers, it's so good at closing out games, definitely a big fan of the Tar Pit. So... that is a draw. Now we have a Liliana of the Veil, so what do we do here? We could play her and take her up, it gets her on the board, and it gets her out of Tar Pit range, but that's still not great, because then we have an asymmetrical discard effect that hurts us more than it hurts the opponent. So, as nice as that draw kind of seems at first glance, I actually don't really want to play her. I just want to pass. Now, I also thought about just firing off this Assassin's Trophy while they were tapped out. Or, excuse me. Yeah, while they were empty-handed. Not tapped out, empty-handed to play around counter magic. But here, I'm like, you know what? I don't need to really hit the Tar Pit until it's animated. And if it's animated, they're not going to be able to counter my trophy, right? So, if they want to do something else, maybe I'll be glad I saved the trophy. If they do want to animate the Tar Pit, then sure, I can get them with the trophy. Looks like they will opt for the latter. We'll let them tap this so they don't have mana available, and then we will hit it with the trophy. And that resolves. Sure. Alright, they get a swamp, they pass. We draw a Tireless Tracker. Not the best, not the best. And now that they have a card in hand, I think it's time to go for the Lily. Because if she resolves and if we tick her up, then at least our effect will be symmetrical. So, Maelstrom Pulse Tireless Tracker. The Grixis control decks seem to present more permanence than Jeskai or Blue-White control. That said, Tireless Tracker is still something I rate a little bit more highly in this situation, just if for no other reason than for the fact that if our Lily sticks around, next turn we can definitely play the Tracker. Whereas if we pitch the Tracker, we're kind of hoping they top deck a permanent for us to pulse before we tick our Lily up again. It just fits better with Liliana to keep the Tracker around here. And we get a Steam Vents out of their hand, that's not very exciting, so... But hey, we've still got a Lily on 4, that's pretty good. Alright, client, what have you got for us? So, they're just going to pass. Fair enough. We draw a Tarmogoyf. Okay. MTGO is behaving a little bit suboptimally right now. Okay, there we go. Just needed a minute to catch up. So we're going to try this Tarmogoyf. You know, it's just a higher value card than the Tracker. Like, if they have a Lightning Bolt in hand or something, that answers the Tracker, and we don't even get the clue off of it. Tarmogoyf's a bigger clock. Alright, that'll resolve. Okay. So here, I rate the Tracker highly enough that I don't want to tick the Lily up. They have so many plays at instant speed, and yeah, that was one of them, Fatal Push. So I guess the prospect of Fatal Push is one reason to leave the tracker there, because, or to lead on the tracker there instead of the Goyf, because they wouldn't have a Revolt trigger. But I still think overall the Tarmogoyf was the better play. And I am glad I didn't take Liliana up, that is for sure. Sometimes you have to know when it's better to just leave her as is. You know, it seems like a waste, right? It seems like counterintuitive to have a Planeswalker, especially when she's not under pressure, and just not do anything with her, just not advance the loyalty. Being disciplined with that is a key component of maximizing your ability with this deck. You don't always have to use the Liliana. Again, it's counterintuitive, it seems strange, it takes a while to get used to, but that is the truth. Alright, we draw a fetch land, so that's pretty good, provided our tireless tracker resolves, of course, so let's test that out. Beautiful, life is good. So we play the fetch land, and now we get to tick the Liliana up. Looks like our opponent has a Snapcaster Mage. Okay, that was a really nice draw. That was a really nice top deck against a Liliana. So, they're going to bolt the tracker here. Of course, I will fetch in response. Go get a clue. No way our opponent could really play around this. We, you know, if they didn't cast it right away, we'd just go to the end step, and then they would have to do it or lose their flashback. And yeah, so they've at least got a body down to pressure the Lily. That said, we got 2 clues out of that. That was a huge draw. We're very glad we hung on to the tracker. And yep, they're gonna crack in with a Snapcaster. Ooh, it's just an island. Just an island. That was a pretty big turn for them to brick. And we drew a bomb off the top. Liliana, the Last Hope. Absolutely glorious draw. We would have been very happy to edict with our Liliana of the Veil, just because she's still around and we still are ahead on card advantage, right? But now we don't even have to do that. We get to play her, we get to tick up, kill the Snapcaster, and then tick up again with our Liliana of the Veil, just to advance her loyalty. And we've got 2 cards ahead in the form of these clues, so it's really looking bad for our opponent. That was a crucial couple turns. That said, they're still at 13, and they're going to drop Liliana of their own. Ticking down. See, this is what I mean about the grindy power of this deck. Looks like they bought back a Snapcaster Mage, if I'm not mistaken. That happened a little too quickly for me. Sorry, I've been clicking quickly because the client is a little bit sluggish. So, regardless, we've got some really nice stuff going on. First things first, we're going to empty our hand, then tick the Liliana up. Yep, it was a Snapcaster Mage that they bought back. And Snap will target Lightning Bolt. Sure, I mean, that's good. That's definitely a very, very good play. But it does not threaten to quite take care of anything we've got on the board. And because we sequenced that way, we force them to expose the Snapcaster. We get to once again cleanly kill it with Liliana, the Last Hope. Now this is so good. Generally in a control matchup, we've got some high-powered targets in the yard to buy back. We've got Tarmogoyf, Tazagur, and Tracker. But it is still better to kill a creature and tick the Liliana up in this situation, especially because we're against burn spells. So keeping our loyalty as high as possible and keeping the board as clear as possible is how we're going to keep these Planeswalkers around and take over the game. There will be time enough to buy back some threats if we need to, but for now, you can't pass up these really clean kills on Snapcaster Mages. You just can't, in my opinion. So, sure, they'll bolt the Liliana of the Veil. We'll crack a clue. We'll find a Scavenging Ooze. Alright, that's a pretty good one. We'll go ahead and fetch and deploy our Ooze. And this is pretty nice because we've got a way to pressure the Liliana and then pivot to closing out the game. Sure. Wandering Fumarole. Alright, this is a mana-intensive manland, but one that is a reasonable attacker or blocker, depending on the case. But not the greatest draw for our opponent because we just get to make the Ooze bigger here. Liliana's effect is still live, but fortunately there is enough fuel in the yard for us to just get big enough to finish her off, and seeing that, our opponent will scoop because their Liliana's going to get taken off the board. We found a Field of Ruin for turn, which, by the way, was a fantastic draw. This allows us to, of course, save our Lilianas from the attentions of this Fumarole. If we didn't have that, you know, maybe we find another piece of removal with our clue, something like that. But if we didn't have that, this thing gets to become a 4-1, kill our Liliana of the Veil, and then they might still be in it. But as it is, we remove their Liliana, we're going to be able to answer their manland, we still have card advantage in the form of this clue, and we have 2 Lilianas on the field, both at reasonably healthy loyalty totals. So I think our opponent saw the writing on the wall, and that was about the right time to scoop. Of course, they could have played it out, but really hard to see them coming back from that, in my opinion. So anyway, that was a good game. Is really interesting. This is a pretty cool matchup, in my opinion. You know, we've got 2 decks that grind really well and kind of have a similar overall strategy while playing radically different cards. For the most part, there is some overlap. You know, Fatal Push, of course, Liliana, the Last Hope, discard spells, etc. But the progressions and the feel and the texture of the opposing deck is different enough from our deck that I like a matchup like this. I find it more enjoyable than a BGX mirror. Maybe that's just me, but there's enough similarities in terms of how both decks, you know, grind and interact that you know it's probably going to be a pretty good game as long as one player doesn't get totally screwed with land or with flooding or something like that. So you know you're in for a pretty good interactive game where decisions matter, but the decks are also different enough that it is, you know, kind of feels like new and exciting territory. So anyway, yeah, that was a fun one. The opponent did well to battle through a bunch of stuff, but I think our sequencing was pretty much spot on throughout, and you know, that hanging onto that track or finding a fetch land and then finding a Liliana, the Last Hope, I believe it was, after that. Yep, that was pretty darn good, and that's where the game really turned in our favor. So, good stuff, and yeah, continuing with our present protocol, we are not looking at sideboarding so much anymore, but I did sideboard against my previous Grixis control opponent, which you can find on the channel if you are so inclined. But yeah, let's head over to game 2 and see how we do. Alright, my friends, game 2 on the draw against Grixis Control, and our opponent likes their opening 7, and you know what, so do we. We get to play a Treetop Village on turn 1. Right now, we don't have a necessarily great play on turn 2. Of course, Trophy on 2 is never that ideal. You know, barring extreme corner cases like an Affinity player that vomits out their entire hand and has one big payoff card. Yeah, you want to trophy that on 2. You don't care about ramping them, but in this type of matchup, Trophy on 2 is not particularly exciting. That said, it's a good card to have access to in the matchup, and hopefully we won't need to answer things that quickly on the board. They are a control deck after all, so we might be safe if we don't draw any other early spells to go Treetop Village into tapped Overgrown Tomb, maybe try Liliana on turn 3, Tracker on turn 4, you know. It's a little bit slow and a little bit lacking in interaction, especially on the draw, but I definitely think it's the raw power of the hand necessitates a keep. We shouldn't really consider mulliganing a hand like that, even though it might be a little bit slow to develop. So, opponent doesn't have anything turn 1. Now, talk about raw power but slow to develop. That's what this card is, so definitely a nice bomb in the matchup, that is for sure. I'm a little less excited to see it now than I would be, you know, if I draw it on turn 5 or something. We can't protect it right now. It could get thought seized, whatever, you know, and of course it's not really helping our early game out. That said, you can never really complain about seeing this card. Whenever you bring it in, it's by definition really good, so certainly not too mad about it. They deploy, a Jace Vryn's Prodigy. So, Yeah, we don't have an answer for it unless we want to hit it with the Assassin's Trophy. So this is an 0-2, and it taps to loot. You draw, then you discard, and then, after that effect resolves, if there are 5 or more cards in the graveyard, it will transform into Jace Telepath Unbound. And while that's very good, they would have to have a pretty specific sequence of events to flip this next turn. It is possible, but I don't know how likely that is. Even if they do, we have answers to a Planeswalker in hand, so I don't think I want to ramp them quite yet, so I'm just going to preserve my life total, play the Overgrown Tomb, and just do nothing, you know? We're just going to do nothing. We're going to let them have a loot. Hopefully it won't hurt us too badly. He's going to loot away a Shriekmaw. That is spicy. Okay. Yeah, I like Shriekmaw in the context of this deck where they can buy it back with Kolagin's Command, with Liliana. The Last Hope seems like a pretty nice piece of tech. Oh, Fulminator Mage. On the play on turn 3, that is pretty brutal. Pretty brutal. He goes ahead and takes care of our Treetop Village. Alright, so this is pretty bad because we are on the draw. We got Stone Rained basically, and now we are drawing more clunky stuff. Maelstrom Pulse, Tireless Tracker, like these cards are good, but not when we're under the gun like this. So now I think we don't really have much of a choice. Whoops, I'm clicking way too fast here. My apologies. Okay. Have we successfully paused? We've successfully paused. Alright. My apologies there. So I don't think we can afford to let that Jace get another loot, then transform, which he was guaranteed to next turn. That's just a little bit too much value for us to handle while we are, getting Stone Rained while on the draw. It's just too much. So we went ahead and trophied the Jace. Then our opponent played a land and passed. We just tried. Yeah, again, sorry for clicking through this too fast. The client is not with me today. The client is not my friend today. It's making my job more difficult. But regardless, came to us. We drew a Hissing Quagmire, and we just played an untapped land and tried the Liliana of the Veil. That was the better play here. We have enough stuff in hand that we don't mind ticking her up, even though it's a lot of gas. The reward was highest for playing her then and there. And of course, holding on to our trackers for the following turn when we can follow up with a land is more ideal. So we tried the Liliana. She ate a Counter Squall. Counter target non-creature spell. Its controller loses 2 life. Yeah, negate with upside. Definitely one of the incentives to be in these Grixis colors, or I guess UBX colors. So our opponent makes land drop number 6, because of course we helped them along the way with trophy, and then they will pass. Okay, Field of Ruin is a pretty good draw. We now know we're going to hit Nissa mana. Yeah, I think all we can do here is, of course, give the Tireless Tracker a shot, see if we can resolve one of these. It resolves. Wow. Okay, fair enough. Definitely was not optimistic about that one. But, you know, they only have 3 cards in hand. It's not like they have a completely full hand. They've made a land drop every turn. They could have more lands in hand. They could have more negate-style effects, or maybe they have Snapcaster, and the only counterspell they could target is this Counter Squall. So, regardless of how it happened, our Tireless Tracker did resolve, and, you know, things were looking pretty grim just 2 turns ago, but this was a big, big swing. Okay, that's another thing they could have had in hand is a Lightning Bolt. Sure, I don't mind that. Again, when they trade a Bolt for our tracker after we've played a land, that is a win for us, and that's a pretty significant win in a matchup like this. They will Inquisition us. Okay. Very glad that's not a Thoughtseize. Our Nissa will live to potentially resolve next turn. But, you know, if we are suspicious of more Counter Squall style effects, maybe she won't. I don't know. That said, they have seen our hand. They do know she is there. So we draw Collective Brutality. So let's think this one through. If they have... What could they have to counter our Nissa? Well, they could have a counter Squall, basically. I don't think they'd play Negate. Or they could have, you know, another catch-all counter spell like Logic Knot. Or they could have Cryptic Command. But, you know, it seems like Cryptic Command would have been something that was spent on the Tireless Tracker. So I don't know how suspicious I am for stuff like that. If they have a Snapcaster Mage, though, it makes sense that they would have hung on to the Snapcaster Mage, because Snap into Counter Squall obviously does nothing against Tracker, and yeah, that could be pretty bad for us, but I don't think we can really play around it, because if we spot check their hand with Collective Brutality, and they do have a Snapcaster just sitting there, that is very bad for us. It's just a blank. And they know about the Nissa Vital Force, so it's not like we're going to be able to coax them into tapping out and then sneak her on the field. Like, that's just not going to happen. They know about her. They should realize how powerful she is. So I think the play here, even though, you know, we do risk her getting countered, is to just try casting her. And it looks like they've got something. Sure enough, it's a Snapcaster Mage, so no matter what we did, there was no real good way around that. Unless we wanted to just play it really cagily and just pass and crack a clue or something like that. But I think this was the more proactive line. We had to make them have something, and they sure did. So yeah, Snap Counter Squall's pretty good. They definitely got us there. But, you know, they have a 2-1 on board, and they're totally empty-handed. They're top decking. We have a clue, Field of Ruin, Manland, 2 cards in hand. You know, we're not in a bad position considering how bad that was and how bad it looked again turn 3 when we got Fulminated. So, Assassin's Trophy, okay. I don't dislike this draw. It's not a bad one. But we'll go ahead and crack a clue, see if we can find anything. Thoughtseize is a reasonable one. But here, I'm just going to go ahead and try to kill the Snapcaster. While this is not a huge threat, and this is not a huge deal, I still don't want to just take 2, and then if I find a Planeswalker, you know, there's something around that I have to answer that can pressure her. Like, this card is just a nuisance, and the fact that they're, number 1, very low on cards, and number 2, that I now have a Thoughtseize, I no longer rate the hand disruption aspect of Collective Brutality that highly. The drain is obviously always fine, but, you know, 14 to 14 draining is not the most relevant either. So I think this is a perfectly fine play to just use this as a kill spell on the Snapcaster, and it works, so fine with me. Opponent will draw a card. They will play Bolas. Nicole Bolas, the Ravager. So that's a pretty nice one, that is for sure. We're going to have to discard, and again, given how low they are on cards, and how likely it is that the one card they're holding on to is either a land they're sandbagging or something they can cast in response to discard, I'm pretty happy to prioritize that Thoughtseize the least. And hey, yep, it was a land they've been hanging on to for a little while, it looks like, so sure. And yeah, we're drawing more discard anyway, so we've got more where that came from. Pretty clearly just have to deal with this Bolas. We could have used a Field of Ruin first and then cast that afterwards, but I don't see a great point to that. They do play Creeping Tar Pits, Wandering Fumaroles. We want to hang on to our field. And of course this way we get to hold up Trophy as well. Alright, looks like they found something. They found Engineered Explosives. Interesting. And they will cast it on 3. Even more interesting. So this is something that is definitely a kind of a tough call at this stage in the game, because of course I could have anything. I do play a lot of permanents on 3. Obviously Tireless Tracker is a big one. My permanents are perhaps a little bit more dense in the 2-drop slot, but then again, the rest of his cards that he is likely to draw line up a little bit better against my 2-drop slot. They can, those creatures, Tarmogoyf and Skoos, they can be killed with an unrevolted Fatal Push, for example. So I like this play. I definitely like that play. It's I'm not sure how great this card really is against me because I'm not likely to overextend anyway, so it's probably just almost always going to be a 1-for-1. In a top deck situation like this on an empty board, it's hard to say. And then I've got stuff like, Tazagur and Nissa that, of course, are way out of reach of a card like EE. So I'm not necessarily sure whether it should come in against me, but I think in that situation, playing it on 3 is just fine. So Field of Ruin, not the most exciting draw I've ever had, that is for sure, but I know I am safe to fire up the Quagmire and get in. Take that. 2 damage. We'll play a Field of Ruin. We have enough utility lands and mana sinks that I'm fine with just playing out my lands rather than sandbagging them for all the usual reasons. We just want access to a lot of mana in this type of matchup. And yeah, I don't see any majorly compelling reason not to fire this up. If it's a Fatal Push or something, yeah, that's pretty unfortunate, but I just don't expect the Quagmire to put in all that much work over the course of the game anyway. They have Lightning Bolts, they have Snapcasters, they have Fatal Pushes. Do I really want to spend an Inquisition now? I don't think I do to clear the way for this, and yeah, they don't have an answer for it, so sure. Collective Brutality, and a land. Alright, so they're going to take away something. Yep, Assassin's Trophy is the take, that is for sure. Alright, so I found a Choke. Now, so that's a little bit unfortunate, because I could have trophied the explosives and then just played my Choke. But what is the benefit of playing this Choke right now? So if I play this Choke right now, I basically force my opponent to spend their engineered explosives on it, because if they start tapping out for other things without taking care of this Choke, they might get themselves in a situation where they're a little bit low on mana. And so like taking care of the Choke now is in their best interest. And I honestly don't mind just using this as bait to get the engineered explosives out of the way. Because the way these games work is that oftentimes, if it's like a control versus a mid-range mirror and it's going really long like this, one player finds the right top deck at the right time, and even if just 1 or 2 turns pass before the other player finds an answer to it, the game can just basically be over. And in my current situation, Tireless Tracker would be that level of a top deck, where if it resolves and if it's even a turn or 2 before my opponent can deal with it, the game will have been snowballed by then. I've got 2 landfall triggers on field right now with the Fields of Ruin. So, and also the other thing is my opponent, they have so many lands, they're not really that blue dependent anyway, besides for Cryptic Command, admittedly, which needs 3 blue mana, but I mean, they've got all the lands in the world. My Fields of Ruin are probably going to be activated at some point, giving them even more lands, more blue sources that they can at least hang on to for Cryptic Command. I just don't think the Choke is very high impact here, so I'm very happy to play it out, and I'm happy to use one of these Fields of Ruin to take away a duel, a non-blue duel, that is going to make them potentially more vulnerable to Choke, but they're just going to go ahead and trade me for it. So that's totally fine with me. It's totally fine with me. Now, maybe I didn't rate the Choke highly enough. Maybe I should have held on to it and, seen if I could have a window where it really can put a hurting on them. But, again, rating my tracker that highly, I chose, my potential trackers off the top, that is, I chose to just use my Choke as bait. Now, Tarmogoyf is a card that I'm very interested in clearing the way for, and boy am I glad I did, because they had a Terminate sitting in hand, so I get to cleanly take away their Terminate. I get to play A good old Tarmogoyf, who, by the way, is a 7/8, which is a little bit insane. You don't see that every day. It does happen, but it is not every day. Today, however, is that day. Our Goyf is gigantic, and they better find an answer pretty quick. Wow, Liliana the Last Hope. So, that's another great draw, and it's powerful enough that I think I want to clear the way for her with this Inquisition as well. The other thing that clearing the way with Inquisition does is if my opponent's sitting on like a lightning bolt or something, maybe I'll be able to fire up the Hissing Quagmire. But first things first, let's go ahead and attack with our 7/8, see what they do. Okay, they will do nothing. We will Inquisition. Our opponent will Counter Squall. Okay. Once more, second turn in a row, we are very glad that we spot checked their hand. This is why I didn't spend those Inquisitions too lightly early on. I could have spent an Inquisition a few turns ago to clear the way for my Hissing Quagmire to make sure they didn't have a Lightning Bolt. That was not worth it. You've got to wait until you have really high-impact spells that you want to make sure resolve and stick around. And in both cases, we are very, very fortunate that they were on a Terminate. We Inquisitioned the Terminate away, then slammed a Goyf. They were on a Counter Squall. We used our Inquisition to draw the Counter Squall, then we slam a Lily the Last Hope. So the opponent's got to have a whole lot of good stuff here to deal with our board now. We probably hoped for something that wasn't Tireless Tracker. Then again, Tracker, you know, of course, if we find even a land is totally fine. Even if we don't, it's totally fine with the Field of Ruin, so maybe that was just a mistake for me to say that. Tireless Tracker is just always good. So our opponent's going to draw and then pass, and we have a land off the top. Sweet. Good enough for me. So I guess first we're going to make sure they have some way to not die to our 7/8. No point in doing anything else. Maybe they have some kind of removal. Maybe this is Snapcaster. It is simply Nimble Obstructionist, who is an interesting card that I think fits nicely into their deck. It's yet another thing that you can buy back after having gotten value out of it. But in this particular situation, it is nothing more than a chump blocker. And of course, that lets them stay alive, but now they are in deep, deep trouble. We get to tick our Liliana up. We get to deploy our Tireless Tracker. We get to immediately make a clue. And I chose, we didn't have to immediately make another clue. Just make sure we're getting 2 clues. We can still hold one up. Our opponent is now out of nowhere so far behind, I don't think they can possibly beat us with 1 card off the top. Best card would probably be Snapcaster Mage, and I think that doesn't quite get you there. Or Kolagin's Command, perhaps. Something that's a 2-for-1, but whatever it is, they don't have it, and we just ended the game with a very commanding board. And again, it was kind of out of nowhere. We baited out the Engineered Explosives with our choke. The other thing I forgot to mention that's nice, of course, is Liliana's. Obviously, very, very high impact card in the matchup, both Last Hope and Lily of the Veil. So, getting their EE off the board, using our choke as bait, also cleared the way for those just as much as it did for our Tireless Tracker. And look, we ended the game with 2 3-drops on the board. So even though that choke play looked a little bit weird, and even though I know there's an argument for hanging on to it and trying to find a window where it would be really good, our opponent was pretty clever, in my opinion, to set that on 3, and I felt obligated to go ahead and use the choke to basically trade off with it, and that paid off. Now, that said, you know, our Tarmogoyf might have just pretty much ended the game on its own. They needed to find a Fatal Push or a Terminate, but we stripped away their Terminate, and then our Goyf was just way too big for them to handle. So, definitely a pretty cool game. Like I said at the end of Game 1, this is a matchup I find very fun. It's a matchup I find very fun. Both decks have a lot of raw power. Both decks have a lot of important decisions to make. And when they meet, it is definitely one of the more enjoyable matchups in the Modern format, in my opinion. And you know, that only really applies if you like grindy interactive games, but, you know, if you are playing Golgari, I think that's a given. If you don't like to interact and if you don't like to grind, you might be playing the wrong deck. Just saying. So, anyway, pretty satisfying feeling here. Pretty satisfying to, you know, sequence pretty carefully throughout the game. Take some lines that didn't quite pay off, like trying to resolve Vanessa. Again, they had Snapcaster in hand, so, you know, no matter what we did, it wasn't going to be great. And then some lines that worked out pretty well, like baiting with the choke, like slow rolling these Inquisitions, hanging on to them until they were of high value. We cleared the way for our Tarmogoyf, then we cleared the way for our Liliana, and we bought back a Tracker, then Tracker got us a couple clues, so even if they had something, even if they had their best possible draw off the top, I think we were well equipped to just take them down. So, anyway, that was a really fun match. I hope you enjoyed the content. I hope you enjoy this type of matchup. I'm always on the hunt for the highest tier opposition in terms of meta share of the opposing decks. Grixis Control does not fit that bill at the moment, but sometimes when the gameplay is really satisfying, or when it's instructive, or just frankly fun, you know, that we're still gonna take a look at that. And as long as the deck isn't too janky, and Grixis Control certainly isn't too janky, it's a collection of very powerful cards in a very coherent shell. It's just the only reason I don't think it has quite the meta share that it used to is because of the advent of Terminus. And, you know, Terminus itself being kind of a necessary reaction to the extreme power and consistency in speed of some of these linear hyper aggro decks in the format. So Grixis can grind with the best of them, but suffers a little bit compared to the Terminus and Path to Exile decks against stuff like Draggen, Bridgevine, and Hollow One and so forth. At least to some degree. But anyway, when they come across a deck like ours, they're probably looking forward to it as much as we are, because we know we're in for a good game where decisions matter, and that's what it's all about. So, hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments below as always, and stay tuned to the channel, more gameplay ahead. I will see you for the next video, and I hope you have a great night.